Extremely judgmental. You can never look at a person and based on the color of your skin decide to hate them.
Well, obviously you can look at somebody and judge them based on superficial features. Obviously you can look at somebody and decide based on their sex or the color of their skin that you don't like that person. It's just not a good thing to do. You shouldn't do it. It's an evil thing to do. And what we're going to talk about today is this alleged incident out of the city of San Francisco where a woman who was recently homeless ended up acquiring a property. And allegedly, the woman who sold the property and people in the neighborhood are very much against a black woman moving into this particular area. But before we get into that, I will remind you that I was at Modern Day Debates. I did a live debate. It was pretty fun. My opponent was very, very angry. And if you want to check that out, that will be linked in the description of this video. But without further ado, let's get into this potential hate crime.
She turned her life around, going from unhoused to first-time homeowner. But an East Bay woman is in anguish tonight because of this, a racist message scrawled across her white picket fence.
So look, I just want to say right off the top that I know a lot of people in my comment section are going to claim that this is a hoax. They're going to claim that this is staged. And one of the things that they're probably going to cite as proof positive of that is the fact that the graffiti actor in this particular case put no black rather than no blacks. However, I will say that they are kind of countering their own message in that they tag this with black spray paint over a white fence. So honestly, I don't think the symbolicism really lines up, but to be 100% clear, if this story is true, it is alleged as of right now, I actually do feel really bad for this woman because she was homeless. She somehow turned her life around, ended up getting to a position where she ended up owning a home. And regardless of whether or not this is a real incident or not, it's a sad state of affairs where somebody actually is able to get themselves from a terrible position to the position of homeowner, and then this circumstance ends up coming into play, regardless again of whether or not it is a hoax or it's something that was actually done to her. And again, if it was done to her, my heart goes out to her. I really do appreciate what she stands for in terms of the American dream, in terms of being able to make it, build yourself back up. And that's why I want to cover this, because if they do arrest somebody, if they do hold somebody accountable, I want to be on this person's side, because I do love the idea that there are more chances in America that you can make it even if you come from poor circumstances, and this is not something that I would want anyone to deal with after they built themselves up. That being said, we will be examining this with a degree of skepticism just because of the nature of this particular crime, the news report, and of course the attention that is surrounding it.
Good evening, I'm Claudine Wong. A hate crime investigation is now underway near San Leandro as detectives search for whoever is behind this. Our crime reporter Henry Lee is live at the Alameda County Sheriff's Office with this story. Henry?
Well, the Sheriff's Office says this indeed is a hate crime and not an expression of free speech.
I would ask them, why not no blacks? Why not? Why am I not welcome here?
So right off the top, I just want to point out that the sign actually reads no black, not no blacks, and maybe, just maybe, this has to do with that European rugby team. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, this is supposedly intended to be a racialized thing. And now, that being said, if this woman was targeted, like I said in the open, I do feel immensely bad for her, and honestly, I don't think that this is the kind of thing that should be going down in the United States of America, especially when somebody has a borderline very inspirational story. Now, I don't know the full breadth of it. I don't know exactly what got into or went into her getting from homelessness to homeowner, but of course, this is obviously a disastrous scenario. It just seems like it's rather suspicious, and she ends up throwing out a couple of different suspects here or there, and you would think this story being out 5 days ago, they would have grounds for an arrest if it was one of those specific suspects.
Sonia Reed is in anguish after she found this hateful message spray painted on her fence outside the first home she's ever owned near San Leandro. Reed's a peer support and recovery specialist and Narcotics Anonymous volunteer who's been recognized for her work after kicking a crack cocaine and alcohol addiction 17 years ago. She was once homeless. These mugshots are all of her at Santa Rita Jail in Dublin, where she also helps inmates.
Look, again, I'm not saying that this is a hoax. I'm not saying that this is a Jussie Smollett kind of situation, but how many times do we see stories of activists in particular being the victims of the very things that they talk about, or of the very things things that they fight against in terms of their activism. It seems like it's a coincidence. Obviously, she has an interesting story in that she was addicted to crack 17 years ago. She has multiple different arrests. She ended up turning around her life. She actually helps other people go through addiction, which I think is absolutely wonderful, but it seems rather questionable, rather suspicious that she of all people would be targeted in this particular neighborhood in a very liberal part of the country with this graffiti right here. And again, it just gives up a bit of red flags. And I'm genuinely sorry that that is the case, that is the state of the world that we're in right now at this very moment, because it's really unfortunate for us to see somebody make it through all these obstacles and seemingly put up another obstacle for themselves.
I know that sometimes people can look at me and misjudge me, but once you get to know me, I plant gardens, I go to work, I come home, I engage with my grandchildren.
She's angry and heartbroken.
I consider whoever put this is ignorant. They don't know any better.
And to be clear, I'm talking about real, genuine obstacles, not systemic structures or systemic racism. This woman was a drug addict. This woman was homeless. She was arrested multiple different times, and she got to the point of home ownership. So yeah, that's admirable on its own. So if this turns out to be a hoax, I'm going to be very upset at that, because the story otherwise would be the story of an inspirational person.
As we spoke to Reed, Alameda County Sheriff's Detectives Roland Chevalier and Jawad Hamad canvassed the neighborhood for leads, interviewing neighbors and looking for surveillance video. The sheriff's office is investigating this incident as a hate crime.
Well, obviously, the Alameda County Sheriff's Department is investigating this. They're canvassing the particular area, looking for clues. And even though this woman appears to have some suspects, some people that are angry, that are upset, according to her, that live in this particular neighborhood, it seems like time will have to tell on whether or not this is legitimate, or this is something that is done by her for some form of attention, for some form of victimization, which again would be the most unfortunate outcome.
Every crime is serious, right? But it's very important, especially for hate crime. We don't want any violence or anything to erupt, right? We want to make sure our community stays safe. We want to make sure that our communities feel safe.
Reed says she had an idea that some neighbors had some issues with her from the beginning. She said one woman had this to say to the man who sold her the home.
She says, well, you did not give me, you didn't get my permission to sell this house to anybody of color.
So look, obviously we're going to have to wait for the investigation to play out. So everything that I'm saying right now is speculative. Everything that I'm saying right now is alleged, and some of it's not even technically alleged because nobody is being charged as of right now, as of this moment, with this particular crime. But I find it really weird, really odd when you have people describing an interaction that other people had, and they're using the language that they would use. Now, this could be totally innocent. She's just putting something in her own words because she's talking to a local news affiliate. But the fact of the matter is, somebody who is racist enough in order to spray black spray paint on this woman's fence in order to target her for being black in the neighborhood is not going to tell a realtor that they were very angry and that they didn't have permission from this person in the neighborhood to sell a home to a person of color. Again, the person of color language is something that these people use. It's something that these left-wingers talk about all the time, and it's not something that typically somebody who hates black people specifically would use to describe black people. Now, again, the language could have been altered or changed through the game of telephone or anything of the sort. This is not evidence per se of some kind of malfeasance on behalf of this woman, but it just doesn't ring true in the way that it was presented to us. If it was actually more harsh language, like, no blacks, which is painted on the fence, that would actually be more believable in my opinion. And then we also hear about a potential neighbor dispute over her priming the fence because she wanted a white picket fence in and around this neighborhood. And honestly, out of everything that I've heard so far, this is the thing that I do believe is the most likely to be true.
Reed says that same woman took offense when a contractor primed Reed's fence with white paint.
And my dream was to build a house and make it a white picket fence.
People are very prissy about what goes on, what goes up in their particular neighborhood, so I could imagine that there is some kind of neighborly dispute. Maybe they called the city in order to get permit enforcement and all this other nonsense. This stuff happens all the time, especially when you have an oppressive regulatory system like they definitely have in San Francisco, like they definitely have in the Bay Area, like they definitely have throughout the state of California. So this possibly is the underrooting problem, the underrooting justification for either party to engage in this particular action. So I want to harp on the fact that I believe that component is in fact real. I believe that component is in fact true. And this could be what is the actual tangible motivation for either targeting this woman or this woman potentially targeting her neighbors with this potential smear.
Cynthia Adams is president of the Oakland NAACP.
We can live anywhere we want to live. It doesn't matter what race you are. It doesn't matter what color you are. If you have the money to move in that area, you have a right to live there.
So sometimes the local news will interview people and they'll add value and context and whatnot. This particular interview did not add value and or context to this particular story, because you have this woman right here saying, look, we can live anywhere we want as long as we have the money to pay for it. And I 100% agree with that. I don't know why you needed the NAACP of Oakland in order to make that statement. You could have picked any random guy off the street and asked them, should somebody be allowed to buy a house in a neighborhood if they can afford it? And they would say, yeah, sure. Like, no problem. Most people are not in the camp of you need strict racial segregation, and oftentimes the open calls for racial segregation are done by black civil rights organizations or people who claim to be black civil rights organizations.
So the homeowner tells me she's torn. She doesn't know whether to renovate and sell it or move in after it's all done. Either way, she doesn't feel safe. The sheriff's office is asking anyone with information or surveillance video to give them a call. Live near San Leandro, Henry Lee, KTVU, Fox 2 News.
I actually try to look up the racial demographics of the East Bay to get an idea of whether or not this would be unusual, because it's in Alameda County, but it's not in Oakland proper. And it turns out that it has less black people than in Alameda, but it's still a significant population of 11%. And apparently this area is one of the birthplace areas of the Black Panther Party. So the idea that black people would be in and around this area, this geographic area, would not be unusual. However, it could be true that they would be unusual in this particular neighborhood, and thus the racial tensions and thus the problems and all that. So take that for what you will. Again, it was actually a little bit more difficult than expected in order to find this demographic information, because a lot of times you would just get roped up for the general Bay Area, but it seems like, again, around 11% is near the national average for black Americans. So I don't know if this particular neighborhood would be shocked or would be upset by having a black resident in there. I want to give this woman the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to believe that this is yet another hoax, but there are the red flags, and obviously I'm leaving it up for you guys to comment, call your shot right now. So if we do a follow-up in the future after an arrest is made, which I hope there is an arrest made, we can make our assessments then.
Such a disturbing story, Henry. How long has she lived there, and has she had any positive interactions with any of the neighbors? I know she talked about the negative one, but have other neighbors been welcoming at all?
Yeah, she has owned this home since December. We did run into a few neighbors who did express their sympathies, but one neighbor also said that her neighbors have been nosy, accusing her of doing too much to make a mess out of her own construction project. So certainly a lot is going on in that neighborhood, a lot of tension, a lot of stress.
So this is actually a good follow-up question from the person in the studio asking the on-the-ground reporter, and she ends up asking if they're good interactions, what's the overall temperature in the neighborhood, and he said most people that he talked to in the neighborhood seem to be sympathetic of her. However, certain neighbors talked about her being nosy, her getting in other people's business, and in addition to that, her construction projects actually creating a mess, creating decay, or the look of decay in the neighborhood, and how they don't like it. And what did I tell you in the beginning of this particular video? Based on her assessment, what she was talking about, and the relationship with the white picket fence and her other neighbors. If anything out of all of this was going to be 100% true, it was going to be that petty neighborhood dispute that this woman was having with the people in the surrounding area. And I think that this is proof positive, because we have affirmation from the other side that people do have an issue with the way that she's doing construction and improvements on her particular home. But again, I'm going to leave this off to you, and don't just assume based on what you want to be true. Look at the evidence as of right now. Look at the fact that we don't have a suspect. We don't have anything in terms of surveillance video, and let me know what you think about this down in the comments below, but give your genuine assessment. Again, don't just assume. If you like this video, show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about a potential hate crime. Till next time.